The truth about Ghislaine Maxwell just had James Comer breaking down and shutting down a hearing in the House of Representatives because he is afraid of what is coming out. Obstruction has been the name of the game for Republicans, but when they try to deflect and distract, they only make it worse for themselves, which is what just happened in a mega viral moment that started with Robert Garcia calling out the truth about the Ghislaine Maxwell cover-up, and it led to James Comer breaking down when he fought in a screaming match with progressive Summer Lee. It starts with what Robert Garcia had to say before this entire hearing erupted.
I want to just make one thing clear. Oversight Democrats, from the start of this investigation, have been crystal clear that we're willing to talk to anyone who has information about Jeffrey Epstein and his crimes. And we don't care if they're wealthy, their position, if they're Democrats or Republicans. And we agree, subpoenas issued by our committee must always be respected. No president or former president is above the law. And I think every single person on this committee agrees with that. In fact, I appreciate that you brought those posters. Mr. Comer, can I actually see that? Would you mind if I actually use that poster that you brought? The ones that you put up? The two that you put up earlier? I'll put those up in a sec. Now, this committee, from day one, and we agree, we've had questions for former President Clinton. And as you know, former President Clinton has begun answering some of those questions in a signed declaration that this committee has received recently, including last week. We know that President Clinton has offered to answer additional questions in different formats. He's also called for a full release of the files immediately, which you or no one in this committee has actually done. It's interesting that it's this subpoena only that Republicans and the chairman have been obsessed about putting all their energy behind. Now, we also want President Clinton to answer questions. In fact, he should continue to answer the questions from this committee, as he has begun doing in not just a signed declaration, but also in other offers to meet with this committee, of which you have rejected. But it's also incredibly interesting that this energy you have to attack whoever you believe your political opponents are, you are unwilling to use on Ghislaine Maxwell, a monster who has trafficked, abused, and raped children and women, and which every committee member in this body knows should be in front of this committee. Where is the contempt charges to bring her into this committee to answer the questions? And I hope that you would agree, Mr. Comer, that that should be one of our top priorities. And let's talk about the president. Your former colleague, Marjorie Taylor Greene, on this committee reported that Trump told her that he wanted to continue his cover-up because, quote, my friends will get hurt. Donald Trump is leading a White House cover-up right now of the Epstein files. And we all know that Epstein himself said that Donald Trump was his best friend for over 10 years. And it is shameful, illegal, and unconstitutional that the Department of Justice has released 1% of the files. 1% of the files. Where is the pressure to get Pam Bondi to release the files? Instead, you're focused, and the committee's focused, on whoever you perceive to be your enemies, and the enemies of Donald Trump. Because let's be clear. We want to talk to President Bill Clinton. We want him to answer our questions. We also want Ghislaine Maxwell to answer our questions. We also want to understand why Pam Bondi refuses to release all the files. 1% of the files have released. Millions have been left. No publications for weeks. That is a crime. And so this White House cover-up continues every single day that the files are not released. And yet, where are those calls, Mr. Comer? You're saying they're complying. That is both a lie and shameful. It's time to end this White House cover-up. I want to yield to Ranking Member of the Subcommittee on Federal Law Enforcement, Summer Lee.
Robert Garcia has been such a principled leader, fighting to make sure that we get accountability and that no stone is left unturned, following the money and following maybe the most obvious member of the Epstein cabal of criminals in Ghislaine Maxwell. Donald Trump has set her up in a 5-star resort where she's eating DoorDash, playing with puppies, and doing pottery. Obviously, there is a cover-up happening here that James Comer doesn't want to talk about, in the fact that he is today bringing contempt charges against the Clintons. Criminal contempt charges goes to show that he has the power to haul people into Congress over the Epstein files and isn't just using it. And that reason is why James Comer completely melted down when that was pointed out by progressive Democrat Summer Lee and erupted into a screaming match. It's no surprise, but it was a meltdown.
It's time to end this White House cover-up. I want to yield to Ranking Member of the Subcommittee on Federal Law Enforcement, Summer Lee, who originally made the motion to subpoena Attorney General Pam Bondi.
Thank you, Mr. Ranking Member. I just want us to speak plainly and lay the facts out what's really happening in this committee. We are 1 week out from Bill and Hillary Clinton, who did not show up for their depositions. 1 week, and we're already having a markup to hold them in contempt. Meanwhile, the Department of Justice has been legally obligated to hand over the full unredacted Epstein files to this committee since August, the same exact subpoena that they are using to hold the Clintons in contempt. And please note that these resolutions are allowing the DOJ to prosecute the Clintons for the exact same things that the DOJ itself is violating. They have handed over 1% of the files and heavily redacted. We are 5 months overdue, Mr. Comer, if you've made no effort to bring in Pam Bondi. So no, the difference is not clear. You have made no effort to demand any answers, to exert any pressure. So with that, Mr. Chair, I do have an amendment at the desk which would hold Pam Bondi in contempt for noncompliance with the bipartisan subpoena that you issued on August 5th, 2025. I hope that my colleagues will support. I yield back.
Minority's time's expired. We're still debating the measure, and we'll take up your amendment once we finish debating the initial measure. I just wanted to respond to a couple things. I agree. We need to hear from Ghislaine Maxwell. We've been trying to get her in for a deposition. Our lawyers have been saying that she's going to plead the 5th, but we have nailed down a date, February 9th, where Ghislaine Maxwell will be deposed by this committee. Now, her lawyers have made it clear that she's going to plead the 5th. I hope she changes her mind, because I want to hear from her, just like I want to hear from her. What's that?
You said the difference is clear.
Turn on your mic, Charlie.
It is.
What'd you say?
If the difference is clear, the difference here is that they are also trying to negotiate. She says she doesn't want to do it. You have not moved in the same way. So you are actually not applying the same standard here across the board. The DOJ is in the same exact subpoena. Ghislaine Maxwell says she won't do it. Bring her in then.
You're out of order, Ms. Lee. You're out of order. So we were going to depose Ghislaine Maxwell, February 9th.
Where are the contempt charges, Mr. Chairman?
You're out of order too, Mr. Garcia. And we will proceed with that deposition. Ms. Lee said the Clintons just missed their deadline by a week. We have been negotiating with the Clinton attorneys for 5 months.
Mr. Chairman,
5 months.
whose time are we speaking on right now?
This is my time. This is my time. I recognize myself, so I have 5 minutes.
You already had your 5 minutes.
All right, well, I'm about finished anyway. I haven't used 5 minutes. I've used about 1 minute.
Comer would rather stop and shut down and interrupt and scream in the middle of a hearing than have Ghislaine Maxwell come before Congress and testify. And to me, what this reveals, more than just the obstruction that they will insist upon, is that they are very scared of us thinking about Donald Trump's first term and the cover-up that happened in the first term. I've talked about that a lot, but if Ghislaine Maxwell, who was willing to lie on the record to Todd Blanche, is willing to do the same before Congress, which she absolutely is, then what are they scared of? Why wouldn't they bring her in? Well, one, she would have to answer the questions of Democrats, not just Donald Trump's personal attorney, but two, it would begin to shed light on the close connection that they were worried about. Donald Trump's administration, Donald Trump's stooges, in his first administration. You remember that letter, that email written by the U.S. attorney, hey, just flagging, Trump was on a flight with Ghislaine Maxwell, and that person who's on the flight with them could be a witness in a trial, just flagging, want you to know. That's the type of stuff that would be brought up. That is the type of information they don't want us thinking about, how this cover-up didn't just start right now. They want you to think as small as possible when it comes to the Epstein cover-up. They want you to think it's just a little itty-bitty, just a tiny little thing, just a blip. It just happened under Pam Bondi, and that's it. That's what Kash Patel told us, that this wasn't some larger cabal, there wasn't a greater, trafficking cabal happening, and it certainly wasn't happening at Mar-a-Lago. That's what they want you to think. They want you to think very, very small. But this goes back further than just the 90s, or I should say deeper than just the 90s, and Donald Trump saying that he just bumped into Epstein at a couple of parties. This was happening in the first administration, which leads to the question, Jeffrey Epstein's death, how much more should we know about that? How much more is there to be revealed? And I think a lot. I think a lot is going to be revealed. I think a lot needs to be revealed. I think more needs to be talked about. Because Donald Trump is doing everything he possibly can to wave shiny objects in our face, because it's been more than a month since the deadline that Donald Trump signed into law. And now Pam Bondi is doing whatever she can to obstruct, blatantly just coming out and saying, we're not getting the Epstein files at this point. That's what they've made clear to us. And James Comer is throwing temper tantrums. And honestly, if we're going to be real, the Clintons should come before Congress. There's two sides to this coin for me. One, I think Bill and Hillary Clinton, if they're trying to make more news out of this, I think that's smart. I don't know how strategic they're trying to be. Maybe they are. But if they're trying to make more news out of this and saying that, okay, if they bring these contempt charges and they're negotiating right now for what an appearance before the Oversight Committee would look like. So if that's the goal, as I talked about in a previous video about Bill Clinton, him just saying, I'm not doing this. If the goal is to continue to have conversations about them, I'm kind of fine with that. Because again, this is not a Democrat or Republican issue. Republicans are obviously the one obstructing it, but there were Democrats and there were Republicans in the Epstein files. Donald Trump claimed to be a Democrat at the time that he was in the Epstein files, so there's that. But what it is to me is a bigger issue. It doesn't matter if they're talking about the Clintons or they're talking about some Republican or they're talking about Trump. It just matters that what they're displaying is that there's a bigger case here, that there's more to be unraveled. And if James Comer wants Bill and Hillary Clinton to testify, then he should just want more testimony. And that's the thing that they don't want us to push for. So in a way, they're just hurting themselves. Yeah, of course the Clintons should testify. And if they're being compelled by Congress, they absolutely should. Because although, it's not like this is going to change anything in any of the way that Republicans approach when Democrats are in charge. But I just don't want any excuse from any Republican or any Trump official or any Epstein associate to say, well, Bill and Hillary Clinton didn't come to testify, so we're just going to wait for Donald Trump to pardon us for contempt of Congress. I don't want that. Again, they'll do it anyways. But I just don't want that both sidesism. They'll do it anyways, and we shouldn't worry about the lines of attacks that Republicans are going to use to dictate what we do. But testify before Congress. That's my two piece. If you want to support that, as always, you can hit that subscribe button, leave a like on this video. If you stuck around to the end, drop a blue heart in the comments. Keep on fighting, y'all. Don't let them silence you. And until next time, I'll see you soon.